My name is Zane Carver, and I'm 32 years old. I'm the youngest of three, the one always overlooked, always left in the shadow of my older siblings. My brother's a lawyer, my sister's a doctor, both successful, admired. Meanwhile, I work as a barely noticed insurance agent in Minneapolis, living in the house my parents picked out for me like I was still a kid. They've never really understood me. Hell, I don't even understand myself sometimes. I've always been the black sheep, never good enough for their standards. And lately, I've started wondering if I ever really knew my family at all. Because when my grandfather died last week, I thought I was just burying a lonely old man. But instead, I stumbled onto a secret so dark, it's tearing apart everything I thought I knew. The truth about Warren Blake, the man my parents always told me was dangerous, has just come to light. And it's a truth that might destroy us all. I just didn't know how deep the lies ran until it was too late. The rain had stopped by the time I arrived at the cemetery. I stood under a gray sky, the clouds thick and oppressive, like the weight of the world was pressing down on me. It was the kind of day that makes you feel like you're just part of a bad dream, trapped in a fog of your own confusion. The sound of the priest's voice echoed in the background, his words distant and hollow, like a man who had read the same lines too many times to care. He was a good man, a man of principle. The words were automatic, meaningless. I wasn't listening anymore. I wasn't here for any of this. I barely knew the man in the casket. Warren Blake had been my next-door neighbor for as long as I could remember, but my parents, particularly my father, had always kept me away from him. He's dangerous, my mother used to say, her voice sharp with disdain. Keep your distance. I never understood why, not until now. The funeral was cold, almost sterile. No flowers except the ones the funeral home provided, and no mourners besides me, the priest, and a couple of the cemetery workers standing off to the side, smoking their cigarettes. I should have felt something, but all I could do was stare at the grave. I had no idea what I was supposed to feel. My parents had made sure I never formed any kind of bond with the man who'd lived next to us for 40 years. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just numb. I stayed until the end, watching the workers lower the casket into the ground, the shovelfuls of dirt landing with a dull thud. When it was over, I turned to leave, but then I saw him, the lawyer. "Mr. Carver," he called to me, his voice hesitant, almost nervous. He looked young, too young to be dealing with a man like Warren. Marcus Ferguson, his name tag read. I nodded, not sure what to expect. "Yes?" "I'm Robert Ferguson," he said, offering his hand. I was Mr. Blake's attorney. I shook his hand, surprised. I didn't know Warren had a lawyer. He gave me a tight smile. He didn't. Not until recently. Something about his words made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I wasn't sure why, but the way he spoke, it was like he knew something he shouldn't. "I was hoping to catch you here," he continued. "I've been instructed to deliver something to you." He handed me an envelope, plain white with no markings. My stomach churned. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. "Warren left something for you," Ferguson added, stepping back slightly, as if he were afraid of what might happen next. "In his will." I looked at the envelope in my hand, the weight of it suddenly feeling like 100 pounds. Warren never mentioned me in his will. Ferguson didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked down at the grave. I could almost feel his hesitation in the air, thick and heavy. "It's about your family, Mr. Carver. I think you'll want to see this." I took the envelope, my fingers trembling. There was something about the way he spoke, something in the way his voice cracked slightly, that sent a shiver down my spine. The letter inside was typed, neat and formal. But the words it contained were nothing like I'd ever imagined. "To my grandson, Zane Carver. If you are reading this, I am gone. And with my passing, the truth can no longer be kept in the shadows." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Grandson? I stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. It felt like the ground beneath me had just shifted, like I was falling into a deep hole, and I couldn't see the bottom. It was too much, too soon. The letter went on, revealing a truth that made my skin crawl. Warren Blake was my grandfather. I read the words over and over, but they didn't make sense. How could this be true? My father, Richard Carver, had never mentioned a father. He'd always told me that Warren Blake was just a man who lived next door. That was a lie. I stared at the letter, my mind racing. This had to be some kind of mistake, some kind of cruel joke. Warren couldn't be my grandfather. My father, Richard Carver, had never mentioned him once in all my life. They'd always made it clear that Warren was an outsider, someone to be avoided. I stood there, holding the letter in my shaking hands, feeling the weight of the world press down on me. Every breath I took felt like a struggle. "You're sure about this?" I asked, looking up at Ferguson, my voice thick with disbelief. He nodded solemnly. "Warren was your grandfather. He's left something for you to find. Something important. I'm just a messenger." I wanted to shout. I wanted to scream. The world felt like it was spinning around me, like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. Nothing made sense. Nothing was the way it seemed. "You don't understand," I whispered, my voice shaking. "My father, he never said anything. He never." Ferguson cut me off. "Mr. Carver, your father has been hiding something. Something that goes deeper than just family secrets." I looked back at the grave, the weight of the words crushing me. What did it all mean? Why had Warren kept this from me? Why had my parents lied to me for all these years? My father, what else was he hiding? And then it hit me. I had to find out. But the truth, I soon learned, had a cost. Cliffhanger. As I turned to leave, a cold breeze swept through the cemetery. I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, purposeful. I wasn't alone anymore. And that was the first sign that someone, somewhere, didn't want me to uncover the truth. The envelope burned in my hand. The words on that paper were a brutal revelation, but they didn't answer the only question that mattered. Why had my father kept me in the dark for all these years? What had Warren Blake, my so-called grandfather, been hiding from me? I stood at the cemetery gate, the letter crumpled in my pocket. My breath came in shallow bursts, and the cold air sliced through me like a blade. There were no answers here. I needed to get home, get to work, look at what else was hidden in my family's web of lies. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I turned, scanning the street, but it was empty, just the gray, wind-whipped expanse of the city. The feeling stuck with me as I drove back to my apartment. The streets blurred past, and I kept telling myself it wasn't real. But what if it was? What if Warren had really been my grandfather? And if that was true, what the hell was my father hiding? Secrets, I muttered aloud to myself, tapping the steering wheel. They ruin everything. And now it's my turn to clean up the mess. When I arrived, the silence in my apartment was suffocating. I tossed my keys onto the counter, grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the kitchen, and poured myself a drink. My hands were still shaking. I had to figure this out. But where did I even begin? The next morning, I found myself staring at the phone screen. I knew what I had to do, but I couldn't bring myself to make the call. Then the phone rang, a restricted number. "Zane Carver," a woman's voice asked, sharp and direct. I froze. My stomach dropped. "Yeah, who is this?" My voice cracked, betraying my nerves. "I'm Emily Harper. I'm calling about your grandfather, Warren Blake." I couldn't breathe. "What do you know about him?" "Not much," she said, her tone oddly flat. "But I know things you won't find in his will. Things that could make everything make sense or destroy you." I gripped the phone tighter. "What are you talking about?" "I think you should come to my office. There's something you need to see." I hesitated. "Why? What could you possibly have that's more important than what's already in that letter?" Emily's voice softened, but her words hit me like a punch. Because what you think you know is only the surface. There's a lot more buried beneath it, and you need to understand before it's too late. An hour later, I walked into her office, a narrow, dimly lit room tucked away in an old building. It reeked of stale coffee and paperwork, the kind of place where people like me, ordinary, overlooked, came to get answers. But I wasn't just anyone. I was Warren Blake's grandson, and now it seemed like I was tangled in something far bigger than I ever imagined. Emily stood by the window, arms crossed. Her expression was unreadable, her eyes fixed on something beyond the glass. She wasn't the person I expected. She didn't look like someone with answers. She looked like someone with her own demons. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice a little more forceful than I meant. She turned, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something, pity, maybe, before it was replaced with steely resolve. "Come sit down," she said. "I think it's time you hear the truth." I sat, my eyes scanning the room as Emily moved to her desk and pulled out a manila folder. She slid it across the table toward me. I didn't reach for it. "Not yet. You've been told a lot of lies, Zane," she said. "By your father, by your family. The question is, do you really want to know what's going on? Or do you want to pretend you can keep it all buried like they did?" I swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing against me. "I don't have a choice," I replied quietly. "Do I?" She gave me a thin smile, but it was cold. "No, you don't." I picked up the folder, but before I could open it, Emily leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. "You might think you're the only one looking for the truth, but you're not. People are already watching you. You're not safe, Zane. Not anymore." I froze, my pulse quickening. "What do you mean by that?" "The people who want this buried will do anything to make sure it stays that way. You're already in over your head, and you don't even know it." I could feel my chest tighten. My hands were sweating. Who wants to keep it buried?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into the folder, pulling out a set of photographs. She tossed them in front of me. The first photo was of my father, Richard Carver. His face was unmistakable, but in the background, there was another figure. A man I didn't recognize, standing too close to my father, too involved in the scene. "This is from the 1979 accident," Emily said. "Carmen Solis was the woman your father killed. This man," she pointed to the stranger in the photo, "he was there that night. He's been in the background of your father's life for a long time. I don't know who he is, but someone does. Someone who's been pulling the strings." I stared at the picture, a sick feeling crawling up my throat. My father. That night. A murder. I tried to shake the image from my mind, but it stuck. The truth, raw and jagged, was starting to seep through, little by little. Emily leaned back in her chair, her eyes cold. "I can't say much more. But I can help you. If you want. But know this, there's no turning back from here." I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. Everything I thought I knew was falling apart. My father wasn't just a liar. He was a murderer. I was in too deep. I didn't have a choice. Cliffhanger. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady. "I'll do whatever it takes. Tell me what I need to do next." Emily looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled, just a little. "Don't trust anyone," she whispered. "Not even me." I couldn't stop thinking about what Emily had said. "You're not safe, Zane. Not anymore." The words echoed in my mind as I stood outside her office, the weight of the photographs still heavy in my hands. Each image, my father in the background, a stranger standing too close, felt like a betrayal. The pieces were starting to fit, but the picture it painted wasn't one I wanted to see. The truth about my family, the man I had trusted my entire life, was shattering in real time, piece by piece. And every answer only led to more questions. I needed to talk to someone. But who could I trust? Emily, the one person who seemed to understand, had been hiding her own secrets. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't the enemy. Not entirely. The whole thing felt like a trap, and I was the bait. I walked into my apartment, the same one I'd come home to for years, but tonight it felt different. As if the walls themselves were watching, listening. I didn't trust the silence. It felt like a breath held too long, about to burst. I needed to go through the rest of Warren's things. The files, the notes, the things that didn't make sense. There had to be more. I dug through the boxes in the corner of my living room, Warren's belongings stacked haphazardly like his life had been tossed aside in a hurry. A journal. Old documents. But no, nothing that made sense. Just the scraps of a life that never really mattered until now. Then, in a drawer I hadn't opened yet, I found a letter. It was addressed to me. I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. Zane, if you're reading this, you're already on the path to something much bigger than you understand. You've asked the wrong questions, but you're getting close. Just know that nothing is what it seems. Your father is not the man you think he is. What you uncover will cost you more than you're willing to pay. But it must be done. If you want the truth, follow the money. My pulse raced as I read and reread the words. The money. That was it. The key to everything. I'd been asking the wrong questions. This wasn't just about the past. It was about now. About the family wealth, the empire built on lies, and the man who'd been living a double life. The man who was my father. I drove across the city, my mind spinning with the implications of the letter. Emily's warning still haunted me. But I had no choice. I needed to find out more. The drive felt endless. The city lights flashed by, but it felt like I was walking through a dream. Every turn I took, every stoplight that flashed red, made me feel like I was being led into the heart of the storm. I arrived at an old office building in a quiet part of town. It was too clean. Too pristine. It didn't look like a place that would hold the answers I needed. I could feel the sweat forming on the back of my neck, a cold chill running down my spine. Something was off, but I couldn't stop now. The door clicked open, and I stepped into the dimly lit lobby. No receptionist. No sound except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. My shoes echoed on the tile floor as I made my way down the hall to Derek Nolan's office. Nolan was the lawyer who had handled my father's affairs for years. He had to know something. When I knocked, the door swung open before I even had time to respond. Nolan's cold eyes locked onto mine. He didn't look surprised to see me. Zane, he said in that clipped tone that always made me feel like a child. Come in. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. I need to know about my father's estate, I said, trying to sound confident, even though the world was spinning around me. Nolan raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a tight smile. What is this? A sudden interest in family business? He poured himself a drink, not bothering to offer me one. I didn't sit down. I'm not playing games, Nolan. I know there's more. My father isn't who he says he is. I know about the money. I know about the accident. He froze, the glass halfway to his lips. Then, slowly, he set it down and sat back in his chair. So, you've uncovered some things. Things I'd hoped you'd never find. You're not getting off that easy, I snapped. I want the truth, now. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. The truth? The truth is a dangerous thing, Zane. But I'll give you this, your father was never just Richard Carver. Not until he wiped out his past. He made a deal, and he's been covering his tracks ever since. All of this, he waved his hand around the room, the business, the house, the wealth, it's all built on a lie. You're swimming in a sea of lies, my friend, and if you keep diving deeper, you're going to drown. A chill ran down my spine. I couldn't breathe. The walls closed in on me. This was more than just a family secret. This was something bigger. Nolan wasn't giving me answers, he was warning me. Why don't you come clean, Nolan? Why don't you tell me what's really going on? He shook his head, his voice dropping to a whisper. Your father didn't just get rich. He killed someone. Carmen Solis. He ran her over in 1979, and everything after that was him trying to cover it up. But it wasn't just an accident. It was a deliberate hit. I felt the ground shift beneath me. I stumbled back, grasping for the edge of his desk for support. You don't know the half of it, Nolan continued, his voice low. And you don't want to. Trust me. I barely heard him as I stumbled out of the office. The air outside hit me like a slap in the face, cold and biting. I was in shock, my mind spinning with the weight of what Nolan had said. But as I reached my car, I caught a glimpse of someone, standing across the street. Watching me. A figure cloaked in shadow. The streetlights flickered as I looked again, but they were gone. I wasn't alone. Cliffhanger. I turned quickly, but the figure was already gone. And as I drove off into the night, I realized someone was following me. The sun was barely setting, casting long shadows down the empty street as I made my way back to my car. The cold, creeping sensation I'd been fighting for days, the feeling of being watched, hadn't left. It clung to me like a second skin, a constant reminder that I was no longer in control of this narrative. Trust no one, Emily's voice echoed in my mind. But I hadn't taken her warning seriously. Not until now. I had to get to the bottom of this. Nolan's cryptic words about my father, the murder, the lies, swirled in my head. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a trap. I had to dig deeper, but every path seemed to lead back to the same place, my father. The one man I thought I could trust more than anyone else. I had barely gotten into my car when I saw them, two figures across the street, walking in my direction. Their movements were deliberate, too practiced to be casual. I was already in the car, the engine running, but the unease in my chest turned into panic. Something told me these weren't just strangers. They were here for me. I hesitated, then slammed the car into reverse. Tires screeched as I backed out of the parking spot, the figures now moving faster toward me. My breath caught in my throat. Not today, I muttered under my breath, slamming the car into drive. I floored the accelerator, the engine roaring beneath me as I tore down the street. The city lights blurred into streaks as my mind raced. Who were these people? Were they after the same answers I was? Or was I just another pawn in someone else's game? I didn't dare look back. But the feeling, the deep, gnawing feeling that I was being hunted, never left. I drove through the city, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Where would I go next? The place I needed to be was obvious, Warren's house. There was more there. There had to be. My eyes flickered to the rearview mirror once, just in time to see a black SUV following me. My stomach dropped. The same damn SUV from earlier. The same shadow I couldn't escape. The SUV kept its distance, but it never stopped following. My mind raced. If I went home, I'd be trapped. If I went to the police, they'd laugh me out of the station. My only choice was to keep moving, keep searching. I parked a block away from Warren's house, my heart pounding in my chest. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the houses themselves were holding their breath. As I walked toward the house, I felt the eyes on me. Every street lamp seemed brighter than it should have been, and every step I took felt like it echoed in the night. The door creaked open with a slight push, and I stepped inside. The air smelled stale, musty, like a place that hadn't been touched in years. The house felt frozen in time, as though it had been waiting for me to come back. I moved quickly, heading straight for the basement where I'd found the most answers so far. Warren's files were scattered across the floor in piles, untouched, and I began going through them. But it wasn't until I found the locked drawer, small, hidden behind a stack of old magazines, that things started to make sense. The drawer was old, the wood dark and scratched. I pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I reached into my pocket for the set of keys Emily had given me. They'd seemed harmless at first, just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. But now, as I unlocked the drawer, I could feel the weight of what I was about to uncover. Inside, there was a single folder, thick, stuffed with papers. I opened it and the first page made my heart race, a police report. The accident. Carmen Solis. 1979. It was more than just a hit and run. The report was filled with inconsistencies, things that didn't match up with the story my father had told me, or the story I'd believed my whole life. The details were there, buried under layers of legal jargon, but they painted a different picture. A picture that wasn't about an accident. It was about murder. My mind reeled as I went through the rest of the folder. Photographs of my father, young, but unmistakable, standing with a man I'd never seen before. A man who was in every document, every piece of evidence tied to the crime. The man who had been erased from my family's history. And then there was a letter. A letter from my father to Warren Blake, dated just weeks after Carmen Solis's death. I can't go to the police, Dad. You know I can't. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. But you have to understand, I was drunk. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to hurt her. I will make it right, but I need you to help me. I stared at the words, my hands shaking as I held the paper. My father hadn't just been involved in a hit-and-run. He had covered it up. He had begged Warren to help him bury the truth. I sat there for a moment, my mind spinning. How had I never known? How had I never seen? I had grown up in a house built on lies, a life surrounded by secrets. And now, here I was, standing in the middle of it all, holding the key to a truth that was more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. I quickly gathered the files and shoved them into my bag, my mind racing with what I had just uncovered. But the moment I closed the drawer, I heard something, a noise, a click at the door. I froze. Someone was inside the house. My heart slammed against my ribcage as I slowly turned toward the sound. The shadows seemed to grow longer, the air heavier. I wasn't alone. Cliffhanger. I took a step back, my breath held tight in my chest, as the door creaked open. Who's there? I called out, my voice trembling despite myself. But there was no answer. Only the sound of slow footsteps coming closer. The footsteps grew louder. They were getting closer. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I backed into the corner of the room, my heart pounding. I hadn't imagined it, the house was not empty. I reached into my jacket pocket, my fingers brushing the cool, metal surface of the keys. The locked drawer, the files, everything I'd just uncovered, it all felt like it was about to be taken from me. The air around me felt thicker, suffocating. Who was there? I steadied my breath, trying to listen. A door creaked open on the floor above me, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps on the stairs. Someone was coming down. I couldn't stay here. I turned quickly, my hand gripping the files I had just stolen from the drawer. The weight of them felt heavier now. They weren't just documents anymore. They were the key to unraveling everything, the key to understanding why my life had suddenly been turned upside down. I rushed for the back door, my breath shallow, my pulse thudding in my ears. But before I could reach the door, I heard a voice, low and firm. You really think you're going to walk away with that? I froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was Nolan. I whipped around, my hand clutching the handle of the door. What the hell do you want? I snapped, trying to keep my composure. I want you to stop, he said, stepping into the room with a calmness that made my skin crawl. You don't know what you're messing with. I took a step back. You're the one who told me it was all connected. You're the one who... You don't know the whole story, Nolan cut me off. His eyes were dark, almost cold. What you've uncovered is dangerous, Zane. This goes far beyond your father. It goes all the way to the top. His words hit me like a punch. The top? What the hell does that mean? Who are you working for? Nolan didn't answer. He just smiled, a thin, empty smile. You don't want to find out, he said quietly, his voice lowering. But you will. I could feel the tension rising in the room like a physical weight. Nolan wasn't just here to warn me anymore. He was here to stop me. And I could see it in his eyes. The truth I was after had become a threat to him. You're not stopping me, I said through gritted teeth. I'm getting answers. Whether you like it or not. He stepped forward, his face inches from mine. You don't understand. What you're looking for is bigger than you. It's bigger than your father. You think these secrets are just about the past? No, Zane. They're about now. And you've crossed the line. My heart raced as I pushed past him, the file still clutched in my hand. I knew I had to leave, now. I had to get out of this house before whatever game Nolan was playing got any darker. I ran out the back door, my footsteps slamming against the gravel as I sprinted down the alley, the weight of Nolan's words echoing in my mind. He wasn't just trying to stop me from uncovering the truth. He was trying to protect something much worse. I reached my car and slammed the door behind me, my hands shaking as I started the engine. I couldn't go home. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Not until I knew what I was up against. I sped through the streets, barely noticing the blurring city lights as my mind raced through everything I'd uncovered. The documents, the photos, Nolan's cryptic warnings, they were all part of a bigger picture. A picture that still wasn't clear. I pulled up to a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city, far from the prying eyes of my family and anyone else who might be watching. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as I stared at the door of the cafe. There was only one person left who might be able to help me. Emily. But the question was, could I trust her? The moment I stepped inside, I noticed something was off. The place was empty, save for one table in the corner. Emily sat there, a cup of coffee in front of her, her gaze fixed on the door. She'd been waiting for me. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, her voice calm but laced with something I couldn't quite place. Anticipation, maybe? I don't have time for games, I said, sliding into the chair across from her. I know more than I should. And I need to know everything. I don't care what it costs. Her lips twitched into a faint smile. I was wondering when you'd finally figure it out. I looked at her, my eyes narrowing. You knew? She nodded, swirling her coffee slowly. I've known more than I care to. But you're right. It's time. The truth isn't something you can ignore forever. I leaned in, urgency thick in my voice. What aren't you telling me, Emily? I need everything. She hesitated. For the first time, I saw something real, something human, in her expression. Your father is in way over his head, Zane. This isn't just about him. It's about the family business. Warren's death, it's just the beginning. There's a bigger player involved. One who's been pulling the strings for decades. I blinked, confusion clouding my thoughts. Who is behind all of this? Emily looked at me like she was weighing the consequences of her next words. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. It's not just your father who has blood on his hands. It's someone much closer to you than you realize. Someone who's been in plain sight all along. The world around me seemed to freeze. Someone close to me? Someone I trusted? Cliffhanger. Who, Emily? I demanded, my voice rising. But before she could answer, the door to the cafe slammed open, and a figure stepped inside, a figure I knew all too well. I couldn't breathe. The man standing in the doorway was not just a stranger, it was my father. Richard Carver. The man I had been chasing, the man I thought I understood. I hadn't seen him in years, and yet here he was, standing in front of me like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The secrets, the lies, they were too much to ignore anymore. He didn't move at first, just stared at me with cold, calculating eyes. I could feel the weight of everything I had uncovered pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. The air between us was thick with tension, and for a moment, I wondered if this was it. If this was the moment everything would finally unravel. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. It was the same voice I had grown up hearing, warm, reassuring. But now, it felt hollow. Empty. "You lied to me," I shot back. "You lied to everyone." "I did what I had to do," he said, his gaze hardening. "You don't understand what was at stake. I couldn't let anyone find out. Not then, and not now." "Not what?" "That you killed a woman? That you spent decades hiding the truth?" My voice was rising, my heart racing. He stepped forward, his hand gripping the doorframe tightly. "It wasn't like that. It was an accident. You don't know everything." "I know enough," I said. "I know you killed Carmen Solis. I know you made a deal with Warren Blake to cover it up. And I know that none of this ends until you're held accountable." "Zane," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You have no idea how far this goes. How deep it runs. If you keep digging, you'll destroy us all. You'll destroy yourself." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there. And that's when I realized the man standing in front of me wasn't the one I thought I knew. He wasn't just my father. He was a man running from his past, from the choices he'd made, from the web of lies he'd woven. "I can't let you keep running," I said, my voice steady. "I can't keep hiding from the truth. Not anymore." The silence between us was deafening. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if the weight of the past was too much to bear, too much to confront. But the truth was already out. There was no going back. I didn't know how much time passed, but eventually, he broke the silence. "You think you have all the answers, don't you?" His voice was tight, his jaw clenched. "You think you can just walk away from this, from me? From everything we've built?" "I never wanted any of this," I replied. "But you've been lying to me my entire life. You've been lying to everyone. And I can't ignore that anymore." His eyes flashed with something, anger, frustration, maybe guilt. It was hard to tell. "You think this is easy for me? You think I haven't spent every day of my life regretting that night? I did what I had to do to protect you, to protect your mother. You don't know what it's like to live with that kind of weight. Then maybe you should have stopped lying. Maybe you should have told me the truth," I said, the bitterness in my voice sharp. He didn't respond, just stood there, looking at me like he was trying to figure out how to fix everything in one moment. But it was too late for that. The truth had already broken through, and there was no fixing it. "I can't be part of this anymore, Dad. I can't live with the lies," I said, my voice steady. "You have to face what you've done." And just like that, everything changed. The door slammed open behind me, and I spun around. My breath caught in my throat as I saw Nolan standing in the doorway, his face twisted in an expression of disgust. He wasn't here to help. He wasn't here to fix anything. He was here to clean up the mess, to make sure no one ever found out the truth. "You really think you can expose this, Zane?" Nolan sneered. "You don't understand. You never did. This wasn't just your father's secret. It was mine too." I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Nolan. He wasn't just the lawyer. He wasn't just some innocent bystander. He had been pulling the strings all along. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I've been keeping this hidden for years," Nolan said, stepping further into the room. "Your father didn't kill Carmen Solis by accident. And neither did I. We both had our hands in it. But you're not ready to face the truth." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I won't let you do this. I won't let you take the truth away." The room felt like it was closing in around me. The walls seemed to move, pulse, suffocate. I couldn't escape. Nolan wasn't the only one I had to face now. It was everything. My family, my past, all the lies that had been building up for years, all of it was staring me in the face. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running anymore. I stepped forward, facing both of them. "I know what you've done," I said, my voice trembling but strong. "And I won't let you hide anymore." In the days that followed, everything changed. Nolan was arrested. My father, too. But the truth, the damage it did, could never be undone. It was too late for redemption. Too late for reconciliation. But even in the darkness, there was a spark of hope. The truth had come out. The lies were exposed. And maybe, just maybe, I could start over. I could live with the truth, no matter how painful it was. As I stood at the edge of the cemetery, looking down at the graves of the people who had shaped my life, I understood something. Some truths hurt. Some truths destroy. But they are also the only things that can set you free. Cliffhanger. And as I stood there, I realized that the hardest part wasn't finding the truth. It was deciding what to do with it once it was in your hands.